Welcome, this is Jonathan Sines, President of Texas Values. Thanks for being with us on one of our wrap-up videos for the 83rd Legislative Session. And we're honored to be here with State Senator Ken Paxton from the Collin County area, and also his district goes into the top parts of Dallas County as well. Quite a big district and a very important district. And so we're excited to be meeting with him today to talk about some issues that he took leadership positions on during this session. And Senator Paxton's no stranger to taking leadership positions. People know that just a couple of years ago he challenged the Speaker in a very memorable race. And so, but tell us a little bit about your first session in the Senate, just some general thoughts about what it was like to be on the in the other chamber.
I have to say I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going in with basically 5 conservatives. As you know, in the Senate, you can block any legislation with 11 votes. So it was nice to have an alliance that we could actually stop a lot of bad legislation. So, it was very satisfying. Sometimes you could pass legislation, but at least you knew you had a pretty good block. At least most of the time we could stop legislation that we found offensive or had some problem with. So yeah. I enjoyed it.
No, that's a very important point. And I think a lot of times people will lose sight of the fact of how much work state elected officials do in the House and the Senate to make sure certain bills never see the light of day. So they don't really have an opportunity of going anywhere. And with thousands of bills being filed, sometimes things can get lost in the process. And so it's very important to have leaders like Senator Paxton that are willing to make sure that that stuff gets shut down. As a matter of fact, there were a couple of pieces of legislation that were attacking traditional and family values that somehow made them their way out of another Senate committee and then onto the intent calendar, which is one step away from getting out of the Senate. But you and others banded together to make sure that they never even came up for a vote on the Senate floor.
That's exactly right. And I think people forget that in the House it's a majority vote to pass anything. But in the Senate it's basically 2/3 to get a bill on the floor to vote. And I think conservatives this session in the House, that is where we did some of our most effective work, is making sure that we were together and organized on which bills we wanted to stop. I don't think that's happened in recent memory in the Texas Senate.
Very important stuff, and we're thankful for that type of work. And you're going to see more of that detailed on our website, particularly with groups like Equality Texas pushing their agenda to attack traditional values. They were ready to claim victory, but they were stopped well short of any semblance of victory because of leaders like Senator Paxton and others. Another issue that's very important during this session was a bill that you were the author of in the Senate, and that was Senate Bill 521, dealing with the issue of parental accountability, parental rights in public schools, but also having abortion providers be involved in the sex education industry and some of the just really disturbing things that we saw happening in public schools. Tell us a little bit about that issue.
Well, obviously I thought it was a great bill because I filed it, but the idea was to ban abortion providers from teaching sex education in our schools. Obviously we feel like it's a conflict of interest. We also wanted consent of parents if any third party was coming in to teach sex education in our schools, because currently that's not a requirement. So we had the consent and really just a ban on abortion providers, educating our kids on sex education.
Well, quite a memorable Senate hearing on this issue, and we're happy to provide a link to that if people didn't see it because it's archived, but really an eye-opener. And the reason why this legislation was filed, or one of it, was because you had parents from school districts across the state seeing just disturbing things that were sexual, suggestive in nature, that had no business being in front of middle school students, somehow finding their way into a public school classroom. And so this really pulled the curtain back and exposed just some very tragic and disturbing things that you would think that school administrators would not allow to happen. But that's why you're in the position you are, and the other state leaders, to make sure that there's that oversight and that parental involvement. And so I'm sure you were quite surprised as well to see some of that disturbing detail.
I was surprised. It was actually a very good hearing to learn about that. But it's also interesting. You also learn that it must be going on because you had so much opposition to it. We had opposition groups coming in to fight it. And if this weren't really an issue, why would we have had so much opposition? So you got the stories about what was really happening, and you had people fighting it. So it made it pretty clear that we have a real issue that we still need to address.
Now, one of the groups that was a very vocal critic of this noble effort was Texas Freedom Network, and that group's history is connected with Planned Parenthood. It was started by Cecile Richards, who is now the head of Planned Parenthood at the federal level. So no surprise that they would be involved in being critical of this legislation. That bill got out of committee. It was very important to have progress on that issue um, being the first time it was filed. And I think that's something that, since it did make it to the governor's desk, will definitely be revisited.
Well, not only we got it out of committee, but we came within a vote of actually getting a vote on it. Had we had one more conservative in the Senate, we would have passed that bill in the Senate.
And there was bipartisan support on this issue, and so it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about doing what's right for public school students and for parents. Another issue where there was support as well, with a tremendous Senate hearing, was a bill you joint authored, which was a constitutional amendment to protect religious liberty. We're seeing attacks, more attacks on religious liberty, and this was an effort to really cut a lot of that stuff off. And so we're thankful for your leadership on that issue and being a part of such a great Senate hearing.
Well, as you know, there's nothing more fundamental to living in this country. Our founders set it up so that we would have protection for religious liberties. And trying to do the same thing in Texas and make sure that those religious liberties are protected is critically important.
And a lot of people aren't aware that we can do something at the state level by having this strong protection for religious liberty in our state constitution, which currently doesn't exist now. It's very general, and the courts have given us a roadmap how to do it. And so that's another issue that's going to be revisited. And you'll recall in that Senate hearing, there was a father that testified about how his daughter was threatened with jail time if she said a prayer or even said the word prayer during her graduation ceremony. Now, thankfully, the federal courts ruled that was not allowed for them to ban her from doing that. But at one point, she was threatened with jail time.
It happens every graduation period. I've already heard stories about this past graduation period where a guy was talking about his faith and they cut the microphone off so he couldn't speak anymore. And you're thinking, how can this happen in Texas? I mean, why should people not be able to express their faith and their free speech rights? That's as fundamental to living in this country as anything we have. And yet we have issues here in one of the most conservative states in the country.
That's right. And even sometimes when you see these students achieve victory, it often comes years later. There's an issue that's in your district that's been going on for 10 years where they're litigating about whether a student can have a candy cane in a public school because it makes a reference to a religious issue related to Christmas, and whether or not you can have red and green plates. I mean, all these ridiculous things, but people are still not getting the message, but we're glad that you continue to show leadership on such an important issue.
Well, like I said, I can't think of a more important issue to continue the fight on.
We're thankful that that you consider these issues not only important but priority. And so we look forward to getting to work with you more on this issue and also having access to you so we can educate people about what's going on, what the critical issues are, and who are the people out there that are willing to put their faith, family, and freedom and their stance for those issues on the line.
Well, these are the issues that motivated my run originally for state representative and then for the Senate. So the issues that you've talked about here today are the issues that are close to my heart and that I feel a great passion to make a difference in.
Right. Well, Senator Paxton, we're glad to meet
Thanks.
with you. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
And look for more updates on the 83rd legislative session from Texas Values.